There we go. Big fish.
Alright guys, so if you enjoyed the content, go ahead and click that red subscribe button, click the notification bell, then click all after you see the drop down box. Give me a thumbs up, click that like button. This all helps because that's part of the YouTube algorithm. So I would appreciate it, and enjoy.
Here we go. Almost 14 inches, I think. Go. Oh, mother trucker, dude. That stinks. Oh my gosh. Just can't feel them bite. They start running with it and their line's all wrapped around grass or a limb. Hopefully get some more chances. Fish number 2 missed. He wasn't a big one, but he probably would have been the same as the others in fish number 4. Alright, so there's fish over here on this side. We just got to get them in the boat. That's 2 we missed. There we go. Big fish. Not super big, but freaking awesome. Check that out, guys. 2.5 pounds, maybe. 2 3/4. Thank you, Lord. There we go, guys. 17.5. Nice long fish. It's a horrible fish landing job right there. The hook just fell out. Fish number 5, guys. I seen that fish on my side scan down there on this lay down tree. Oh, it feels good to have 5 in the boat. That looks like it's good enough. It's fish number 5, 16 inches.
What's up, guys? All right, that's it. We ended up coming in 8th place, as you can see. But I was super happy because I got my 5 fish, and that's really all I set out to do today. I fished this lake maybe 3 times. The first 2 times I fished it was at night, and I knew what to expect a little bit going in, and I had broke down what I was going to do, the areas that I was going to concentrate on and catch my fish before I even got there. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to break that down and go through that and let you guys in on what it takes to be successful and break a brand new body of water down that you've never really fished before, or fished maybe just a handful of times. I've been blessed by the Lord with a family of fishermen that has showed me since the age of 2. My dad took me fishing at 2 years old, and grew up fishing with my dad, both of my grandparents, my uncle. They're excellent fishermen, you know, from bluegill fishing, bass fishing, catfish, you name it. So it's been instilled for me from the very beginning, and I have a strong passion. That's my passion and desire. Besides, number 1 is the Lord in my life, and He's blessed me with this. So I just want to share it with you guys, and hopefully somebody can get something out of it, and it'll help you become a better fisherman. You need to learn the seasonal patterns of bass. So you need to know what bass do during every season. And right now it's midsummer, so we have air temps in the mid 90s, water temps in the high 80s, and this particular body of water, it's going to be a little bit different because the water is clear. It's surrounded with about 50 feet of standing timber around the lake. You have a whole lot of grass growing from the bottom of the lake. It's surrounded with grass. I have to know the primary forage, the bait fish that the bass are going to key on. It used to be bluegill in this lake, so you want to do your research. You want to Google Cedar Creek Lake, find out what the primary forage is. There's plenty of information online. This is a Fish and Wildlife managed lake, so they're managing it as a trophy lake. You can only keep 1 fish, from what I can remember, that's 20 inches or larger. So they're doing a really good job. There's a whole lot of giant bass in this lake. There's a whole lot of 13 to 17 to 18 inch bass in this lake, but there's a whole lot of giants in there too. So they're doing a really good job. So do your research on that. Plenty of places online that you can go to research that. So what do bass do during the summertime? Okay, so you're going to get that early morning bite. In this lake, what I found out, depending on where you're at in the lake, during the summer, these fish, they feed in these little window time frames of opportunity. So you have like 4 different patterns that you can use on this lake. Number 1, there's definitely a top water bite at some point. Probably going to be early in the morning, and I also seen it in midday. If you can find out that window of opportunity and where it's going to happen on the water, you can capitalize on some big fish. So that's going to be your bonus fish. Number 1 primary pattern in the morning, I focused on the shallow, so from the bank, there's grass from the bank, and then you got that first grass line into your deeper deeper part of the water, probably 7 or 8 foot deep. So I concentrated on that area right there, the very first grassland out from the bank. I knew there was going to be some fish pull up there shallower and in grass. I just went with my confidence bait. You know, whatever you have confidence fishing, you want to throw that first. So my confidence bait is, as you guys already know, the Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver. The color was real specific that I chose because the primary forage in that lake used to be bluegill. I know there's threadfin shad in there. There's probably gizzard shad in there too. But I know they feed heavily on bluegill. So I chose the Magic Swirl, which is green pumpkin and a little taste of blue in there. Pitching that at the edge of the grass line. And I caught all my fish in this one cove. I missed 2 really nice fish that I know of. And I had my entire limit by 8:30. And one of the things that kept me fishing that very first grass line there next to the bank is that I could see fish on my graph. So you always want to be aware and pay attention to your electronics to make sure that there's fish there so you're not wasting your time. If there was no fish up there on my graph, I'm not going to be casting and fishing the grass line, you know, because I have a side finding unit that can reach out and see if there's actually anything up there or not. And if there's nothing up there, I'm not going to waste my time and fish that area. I'm going to move on and try to find something else. All right, so other than that primary grass line during that morning, I also noticed on my graph, because I was paying attention to my graph the entire time. You always want to be aware of that. I saw these patches of grass that had these, periodically would have fish around it. Down there outside past that first grass line were these big patches of grass growing from the bottom. And it was all within, you know, this row of standing timber. I was fishing in between the trees of the standing timber. And not only that, the standing timber had, you know, its limbs under the water, and I could see fish hanging on the limbs too. So they were also suspended in the trees, in the shallow trees. That whole morning, like I said, you know, I fished methodically that one cove. It was pretty much on that one side of the bank, and it was going to be the shady side because, you know, the sun came up behind that, so that was going to keep shade a lot longer than the other side. I didn't try the other side very much. The sunny side, not to say there wasn't going to be any fish over there, but I noticed the majority of the fish hanging on the, you know, the shady side, or what was going to be the shady side when the sun came up. So I caught some fish in a couple fish in the patches of grass outside of the first grass line. Caught several, lost a couple right outside of the first grass line, and then I seen a lay down tree all the way in the back of that cove. And on my side scan, I could see the fish. I could see the shadow of a fish. So I kind of stopped and backed up a little bit, casted my Beaver up in there, and that's when I caught that 16-inch fish right there. So always pay attention to your electronics. You know, they're super important. They can land you that winning fish. I'm just kind of pulling this out of memory here. So what I figured out after I caught my limit at 8:30, I fished for another 30 minutes in that cove. And then I'm like, you know what? I want to go explore in the lake. I want to see what else this lake has to offer, because I like what I see. I love the grass, the standing timber, the clear water. It was just beautiful. I know there's big fish in there. So I took off down the lake and pulled up my GPS on my graph, and I saw the roadbed. This thing has a known roadbed that goes across the entire lake, and then it also has a underwater railroad that, you know, whenever they flooded the lake, there's a railroad that runs across the lake too. So I went and checked out both of those. There was a couple people fishing on each one of those, and I did notice fish stacked up on certain parts of the roadbed and the railroad itself. So whenever I left that cove, I was noticing on my graph, you know, the water's getting deeper. It's like 40, 50 foot deep. And you have these mature standing timber trees that are growing from the bottom, right? That are these huge oak trees, maple trees. I don't know what they were, but their limbs stretch out really far. And I noticed there was a whole lot of fish suspending from the top of that tree all the way down to the bottom, almost on every limb. There was a big bass. I know it was bass. Probably some crappie in there too, but I know it was probably holding some really, really big bass. And I seen it on certain parts of the lake where these trees held these fish. So that's another pattern right there. So you can target those suspending bass in those trees with like I would probably use a swim jig with a swim bait trailer, or just like a grass pig on a Texas rigged with like a pegged weight on it. So as I continued down the lake, I noticed these real subtle underwater humps that are holding these big fish. And it looks like, you know, if it was a bass, it was like 4 or 5, 6, 7, 8 pound bass. Just looks like spaghetti on your graph, you know, over this hump, right on top of the hump, on the bottom, orientating itself on the bottom on this hump. And I noticed there's probably 2 or 3 different humps just out in the middle of the lake. I don't know what they were, but each one of them had fish. But all of a sudden, I guess it's about 11:30, these fish start coming up in the jumps. So they're pushing the shad up to the top, and then I noticed these fish. I'm assuming they're bass. They were busting these shad, but just like that, it was over. That's what tells me right there. You know, if you know the area and the time of day that these fish are going to come up and hit top water, you know, that is a bonus pattern right there. So what do fish do during the summertime? Summertime on Cedar Creek, here is my thoughts. The morning bite is definitely when you're going to capitalize on your on the most fish. So you can get out there, you can get your limit really quick, fish that shallow water grass line. I say shallow water, you know, 7 to 12 foot deep. So go up in a cove, target that shallow water grass line on the outside edge with something soft plastic, or even a crankbait, or a weightless Cinco. Try all that stuff. But I use a Texas rig Beaver, and I had a hint of blue in it, and it was green pumpkin. Secondary, as you're fishing that outside grass line, notice on your graph if you see any fish hanging in those patches of grass, go ahead and fish the patches of grass in that standing timber, because they're going to be hanging around that standing timber. And if you have standing timber around patches of grass, that's going to be even a bigger plus for you. So concentrate on that. That's going to be in your deeper water, probably around 12 foot deep. Be sure you let your bait, hit that button, let it hit all the way to the bottom. And whenever you're working the bait and you hit that patch of grass and it hangs your lure up, you want to rip that out violently and just let it fall. So you're going to rip that bait out of the grass, and more than likely that's when you're going to get your fish on, is when it rips out and it starts falling back to the bottom. Work your way to the back of the cove. Look for any differences on the bottom. I think that lay down tree that I found on the bottom, because there wasn't too many lay downs, it was all standing timber. So I had that lay down tree, and I noticed on my graph that shadow of that bass. And it also had patches of grass around the tree. Have you a top water tied on, ready at any moment for the bass to come up in the jumps, because you never know when it's going to happen. That's going to be your bonus pattern right there. Second, after you've limited out, start heading out into deeper water. It's the sun's coming up. It's like 9, 10 o'clock. Look for those suspending bass in the deep trees. have you a swim jig tied on with like a swim bait trailer, or some kind of swim bait bait where you can throw it and just let it fall and work it across those limbs. I think that's where you're going to catch your bigger fish. So that's pattern number 3. So pattern number 4. I know you got your road bed there. You have your railroad track. I wouldn't even fish that. That's known. People know about that. They fish it all day long, every day. It's hit really hard. So what you want to do, you're going to have to spend your time out on the water to figure this out. I'm going to have to figure this out and figure out where these little sweet spots are in the lake that are holding these giant bass. And when I say that, I'm talking about those little subtle humps on the bottom. I don't know if they're rock piles. I don't know what they are, but they were probably there before the lake was flooded, and it's holding these big fish. And I'm talking like, 40-foot deep, anywhere from 25 to 40 to 50 foot deep. You see these subtle humps that are holding these big fish. Go out there, spend you some time on the water, find these humps, fish for it. I would use a 3/4 ounce jig or a heavy swim bait, a Carolina rig. So those 3 things would be really good to target those deep fish on those little subtle underwater humps. All right, guys, so that's it for Cedar Creek Lake. Again, let's recap. So we have pattern number 1, the fish the outside edge of the shallow water grass line. Pattern number 2, go out a little bit further from the outside edge of that first grass line. Fish those patches of grass in the standing timber in about 12 foot deep. Pattern number 3, the suspending fish in the deep trees, the standing timber. Find them on your graph. They're not in every tree, so you want to search for them. Pattern number 4, those really deep, subtle underwater humps. Got to find you some of those with fish on it. That's probably going to be how you win the tournament. Pattern number 5, the bonus pattern. Always be ready for that vicious topwater bite. Okay, so now that we know the key patterns to catch bass on Cedar Creek Lake, the secret to winning the tournament is putting in your time to find those spots on the lake that we just went over and see which ones hold the largest bass of the lake. That's going to be the key to winning the tournament. Spend the time out on the water on each of these key areas during those times of the day that we discussed to target and locate the largest bass in the lake.